Hello, my name is Cynthia Tran, and I will be examining the Ukrainian Supplemental Assistance Act that was just passed this last April. As the war in Ukraine prepares to undergo its third year in 2024, the United States continues to advance its financial support for Ukraine against conflicts with Russia. The act is formally called the H.R. 5692 Ukraine Security Assistance and Oversight Supplemental Appropriations Act. This allots 13.78 billion to provide assistance, including training, equipment, weapons, logistics support, supplies and services, salaries and stipends, sustainment, and intelligence support to Ukraine's military. The act builds upon previous legislation since 2022 when the full-scale invasion from Russia initially began. The president of Ukraine has stated that without American support, the Ukrainian armed forces could not win the war and would be forced to retreat, while Ukraine itself might not have survived as a sovereign nation. Despite all of the ongoing efforts to assist Ukraine from allied countries, the cost of aiding in the war has not yet yielded any solutions, and no end is foreseen. So, in the speech, I will expand upon the pros and cons of the Ukrainian Assistance Act as it impacts people domestically and internationally. Currently, the United States has contributed to most supportive funding to Ukraine, along with the European nation under NATO. The United States has recognized Ukraine as an ally since the invasion of Crimea in 2014 by Russia and further supported financially since the quote, premeditated, unprovoked, and unjustified invasion of Kiev in 2022. The Russian attacks have resulted in troops' deaths and injuries, nearing 500,000, and it has left infrastructure demolished, leaving vast parts of the country in blackout. The Ukraine Assistance Act pro argument first and foremost strengthens Ukraine's defense in arms and militarization domestically. As of date, the U.S. departments have obligated around 101.2 billion and dispersed 67.5 billion with 12 billion available to use. According to the Department of State, military assistance includes air defense, firearms, ground maneuver, aircraft, aerial systems, anti-armor, and maritime. But for Ukrainian civilians, the act additionally provides humanitarian relief to those whose lives have been upturned and displaced, as well as taking in refugees. Non governmental organizations or NGOs allot the funding into provisions of food and medical supplies to decrease the number of injuries and deaths. This significantly improves Ukrainian security and socio-political situation as the country continues to reach its war goals to remove all Russian troops from internationally recognized Ukrainian territory. The overseas recognition and assistance provides an important boost to morale in Ukraine, especially considering that a country as relatively small as Ukraine, in comparison in scale to Russia, can still make a stand for independence. The US stands to gain an equivocal amount by supporting Ukraine. The second pro argument examines the advantages the Ukraine Assistance Act affects the United States domestically. According to Yale Insights, the US is the single biggest winner from supporting Ukraine. It is well known that the US has a very strong military system for itself, offering international support when it proposes advantageous benefits for itself. The Act allocates funds to the US departments, but the funds actually stay circulating within the country rather than directly being sent to Ukraine, where money pretty much holds little value in a place of war, but physical assets do. US defense contractors use the money to invest in manufacturing facilities that create weaponry and supplies for the Ukraine army. And this in turn creates thousands of jobs across 38 states directly, with vital subcomponents sourced from all 50 states. The US, by being an ally, acts as an extension of Ukraine's landmass and resources, replenishing what the latter country does not have predisposed in their industrial infrastructure. But the war indirectly aids the US economy since previous weapon shipments were largely drawdowns, as well as lessening the relative economic burden on the US by revitalizing NATO. Um, the exorbitant legislative act, this act, by the United States doubles as a showing to the world that the backing of a first world country could shift the tides of war. Prior to the war, only a couple EU countries backed Ukraine. But now, along with 11 countries, the EU has recently seen Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, an alliance which contracts the members to spend 2% of their GDP on defense, which alleviates the US budget in the future. In response to the massive budget allocated towards the Ukraine Assistance Act, controversy that presents the first con to the argument is the risk of misuse of the money. A recent corruption case was exposed where a Ukraine defense enterprise embezzled 40 million from public ammunition procurement funds. I believe the company was called Lviv Arsenal, and they had siphoned money in which the defense minister and head of military recruitment mismanaged. Opinions were also furthered by the stigmas of Ukraine by being um, the most corrupt nation in the world, from polls conducted by Ernst & Young in 2017, and the second most corrupt nation in 2022 in the EU, according to Corruption Perceptions Index. US lawmakers have since demanded for tighter accountability and transparency regarding the distribution of military aid. But in regards to overall financial distribution, the resources for Ukraine could potentially drain other fundings to domestic or international conflicts. So, for example, the war in Gaza and the China Taiwan conflict raised proportions that an overarching bill would be necessary for equal military assistance packages. Growing concerns from the US citizens is that the consequence of aiding a war could take a hold on its people. So, something that most of us have actually seen is higher taxes or the inflation. According to Heritage, the United States is already a fragile economy, and so the act is not really central to the key security challenges facing America, and it creates an even greater burden for US taxpayers. Unfortunately, the price of selflessness is reflected in the US's own financial inflation. A very major aspect of war is that it's very unpredictable. So winning is pretty much unforeseeable for either Russia or Ukraine right now. The second con to the Assistance Act is the prolonged expenditures and the prolonged war that the act could inevitably cause. Dmitry Peskov, a Kremlin spokesman, has stated that the act will make the United States of America richer, but further ruin Ukraine and result in the deaths of even more Ukrainians, the fault of the Kyiv regime. So until the war is over, both United States and Russia will continue to spend billions and lose the lives of millions on a stalemate conflict. So while financial aid can assist defensively on the battlefield, the long-term strategic model is more imperative to win the war in Ukraine. An unstable crisis management model of Western aid emboldens Russia to escalate. And so we could actually be provoking Russia to enact higher retaliatory measures. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has stated that the act is a direct sponsorship of terrorist activity, an interference in international affairs, and a road to escalation and rise in tension. Both Russia and the United States are global adversaries. They also withhold nuclear weapons that could potentially instigate the next world war. The legislative approval of aid to current warring countries could deepen crises throughout the world. The Ukraine Assistance Act poses both solutions and challenges that affect the Russo Ukrainian War. It establishes both military and humanitarian care in the short term to hold off Russian advances. Indirectly, it brings prosperity to the United States domestically and creates economic opportunity for a politically just cause. But the risks adhering to the act come from outlier misuse of money by corrupt persons and the repercussions of the citizens of the United States face from defending another country. Although the act may not be the finalized proposition to win the war, it has made its mark in the fight for Ukraine's independence, revitalizing other countries to do the same for Ukraine. Thank you so much for listening. Here are the references, and I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.